Hey guys, welcome to another answers video. In this video, I'm going to be answering two questions from my great subscriber, Jason6105. And I'm going to answer his easier question here first. Would you rather have Carol tell you to look at the flowers, or have Rick say, that's what I'm going to use to kill you? Have him say that to you. Now, I would rather have Carol tell me to look at the flowers because then I know it's time to duck. Whereas, you never know when Rick's going to strike with whatever it is that he said he's going to use to kill you. Because Rick waited a long time to end up killing Gareth with that machete, which is where that quote came from. And yeah. But then the second question here is, if Shane killed Rick in that episode where, let's see, that was season 2, like near the finale of that season, and Shane and Rick were like having their battle there, and Rick ended up killing Shane, but what he's saying is, what would happen if Shane killed Rick there, and then what would it look like today with Shane as the leader? Now, I think that's a pretty awesome little scenario there. Definitely something that I'm going to have to go into a lot of depth with because I'm a weirdo, but as you can see, I have my action figures here instead of just having the computer screen as usual, because I want to use a little more visual effects than just, you know, computer screens and me talking. But yeah, so let's start off. So if Shane killed Rick, and Shane is now the leader of the group that was at that time, and I'm pretty sure these represent the characters from that group at that time. I got Glenn, Andrea, that's supposed to be Beth. I don't have a Beth figure because they didn't make one, and I never really customized my own, but she's standing in for Beth. Herschel, then there would be Shane, Maggie, that's supposed to be Lori, and then Daryl, Carl, and Carol. That's the group, and there were other characters, but those characters I'd assume would have died off at the same point where, you know, they died off in the show normally. So, but then how would his leadership work? I think to sort of find out how he would take the group and how he would lead them in his way, we kind of have to take a look at how he is as a leader and a person. Now, he's a bad leader because, do you remember the well walker situation? That was sort of his heading there. They found a well that had a walker at the bottom, and it was swelled up with crap. His idea, or at least the idea that he was leading, was lowering Glenn into there to attract the walker, and then Glenn would drop a rope around the walker, and then they'd pull it up. That was bad for so many reasons. First off, Glenn almost got killed, and Shane, if Shane really cared about his people, Shane would have gone down there himself, which is really what a good leader does. He doesn't just send his people to risk their lives all the time, which is something that Shane would do. He seems to treat his people as pawns, and not so much as people that he cares for. And then, when the camp, he was in charge of the camp, and Rick wasn't there, Rick was in the hospital still, Shane didn't take very good care of that camp. He sent out, like, half the people to go collect supplies, and then he wasn't going to go rescue them or anything, and if it weren't for Rick being there, those people would have died, and then Shane would have been in charge of the last straggling few people in that group. So, yeah, he's a bad leader for that reason. And I believe he also wanted to, like, stay at that camp for a long time. So, yeah, and he has to depend on Rick a lot because at that point, remember, they stayed at the camp and then the walkers came. If they didn't have the guns that Rick brought back, they would have been screwed. Plus, Daryl wouldn't have stayed with their group if Rick had not been there to sort of make amends with everything, and in fact, Daryl and Merle would have robbed the camp. So that proves that without Rick, Shane is not a very good leader, and he can't really take care of people. Now, as his personality, he is a hothead. Now, we've seen him attack Rick, like, twice, I think. One time he almost smashed Rick with a lead pipe. That was messed up. He's a really, really tempered person. He has a huge temper. Okay, and he attempted to rape Lori, remember that? It was like, sort of, it's like he's going insane there or something, but that just proves that he's really weird there. And then he started the raid of the barn, which proves that he doesn't have very good people skills, whereas Rick was trying to, like, woo Herschel and make him believe that this group is good and they can stay there. Shane's idea was just to go on out there and just immediately blow through the barn after he found out about it. And yeah, it may have been a good deed or a good thing to do, but there are better times to do those sort of things. He should have found a more opportune way and a better moment to do that. I think that was a bit of a fail, the way Shane handled that situation. And then he's also he's a backbiter. He not only turns on Rick just because Rick lived and Rick is going to be with Lori, but he remember when he was with Otis and he just shot Otis's leg and left him there to die so that he could get away? That proves that Shane is not a very good person just right there, and the fact that he would turn on someone in his own group like that proves that he's not a very good leader at all just from there. Now, where would the group be after the farm is really a good question that I'm thinking here. With Shane as leader, I don't think they would have gone to the prison. Shane's idea was sort of just finding a good place and staying there, which, I mean, our group does that all the time, but Rick sort of decides to travel around a long time before they settle on a place. Like, they traveled for a long time before they finally came upon the prison and decided to stay there. Or at least that's what it seemed. But whereas Shane, remember at first, after they got off the freeway and stuff, they sort of just camped out there, and seemed like Shane wanted to stay there for a long time. So I think Shane would have taken the group to some remote area and they would have just stayed there. It would not have been the prison, and therefore they would have a completely different story arc from now. They never would have run into like any of the characters that we're into now, and they'd have a completely different group from there, if not a no group because of the way he leads. But okay, if you remember, after Rick kills Shane, he finds out that there's a horde coming their way. But if Shane killed Rick, he would not have been there to see the horde coming, would he? So therefore, he would have gone back, they would have been inside the house, and then the horde would have come pouring in, and they wouldn't have enough time to escape, which makes me think that there might have been more deaths. But I'm not going to say that any of these guys would die. Maybe, I'm going to say Beth would have died because she barely escaped anyway, and they had some warning there. So Beth would have gone, and then their group would be slightly smaller right there. But if you remember, Rick was really the one who got Herschel to go with them and stuff. Herschel was kind of like, seemed like he wanted to stay there and shoot all the walkers and stuff. I think Herschel would not have been feeling good about the whole Rick being dead thing, and he just would have probably gotten eaten in that episode, or the next, I mean, after Shane killed Rick. So I think Herschel would have also died at that point, leaving the group a much smaller size just right there. So Shane's leadership, not so much. And that leaves us with this small group to build up from. Now, under Shane's leadership, we know that Shane is a real big fan of Lori and Carl, so he would do anything to protect them, which means he doesn't really put the group's needs ahead of those two's needs, which is not necessarily a good thing. It seemed like Rick sort of wanted everyone to be taken care of. He did care for his family a lot, but it didn't seem like he would just abandon his group to take care of these two. I think Shane might have just at some point ditched and left with Lori and Carl, but let's say he didn't. Let's say he wants to be the leader of this group. Now, just from the death of, let's say, Herschel, that would have left Maggie a mess, and that would have changed their relationship up a lot. And then, we don't know, without Rick, would Carol have become such a tough character? I don't think she would have developed to be such a tough character, maybe, but I don't think Daryl would have stuck around for too long, would he? Just because without Rick there, did he really seem like he was all that close to any other character? I think he liked Rick to the point where he wanted to stick around him, but as for the group that would be left, this small little crappy group, I think Daryl would have left, but of course, if this happened in the show, that would really piss people off, so he would probably stay, but considering that we killed Rick off in the show, I could imagine Daryl leaving. So now, with a group that is smaller than that, you now have this small little amount here, and where would they go? After they leave the farm, let's say they escape the farm, and Daryl eventually splits off, they would just be stuck in one position. I think they would like grab vehicles and take it out to some remote area and try and stay up there. Like, remember that group that Governor runs into in like season 4? They would sort of be like that group. I think that was Martinez's group. Yeah, that's totally what they would be like, I think. And of course, this is all just what. There's nothing here that's not speculation. This is all speculation. So if you don't like the way I'm speculating so far, I'm sorry. I can't really help that. But this is the way I think it would go. Now, the problem is, I don't think Andrea wouldn't have ran off and gotten lost. She would have like stuck with the group. And also there was T-Dog there, so, but I don't have a T-Dog figure, so let me just grab a figure here to represent T-Dog. I'm sorry, yeah. I guess he'll do. Tyrese, which they would never run into Tyrese or Sasha, I believe, and they never would have actually become anything there. But this is what they'd have left. I believe Tyrese would stay with Shane because from the beginning, this sort of group right here, they were following Shane, so I would believe that they would stick with him. But what we've got here is just a very small group, and yes, what we have is a good scavenger, a good fighter with T-Dog, and then a leader who's very, very bad at leading, but he's a tough guy. The rest are, she's good at killing walkers, but Maggie was inferior at that point. Lori is just an emotional mess as well as just a mess all around, and with her husband and his dad dead, I think they would have like gone into a depression that would cause a lot of trouble. So from that point on, I believe they would still be in one centered area. Now, if talking about show-wise, if the show were to do all this stuff, it would be a horrible show, but if they would probably make Shane become like Rick, but with what we've seen of Shane, I believe this is how it would go, like, logically. Not that the show would go with logic if they had killed off Rick, but logically speaking, I think they would end up in this sort of position. Now, Andrea, I think, would have probably not have died at the same point, and may not have died, like, any point throughout the season, but let's say they're at the camp, and then a walker herd shows up. Would they really be able to defend themselves? I don't think so. I think they would have to be on the run again, and they would lose, let's say, Carol. Which, I love Carol, but I don't think she would have survived in that early point where she wasn't a very good fighter. And that would be sad, but I believe it would be like that. And, of course, a lot of you are probably thinking Daryl would probably stick with them because, Carol. He seemed like he liked Carol, but I don't think he liked her to the point where he would stick with them. Like, remember, he was acting mean to her and stuff? I think that was just... He seems like he would go off in search of Merle. That would definitely be what he'd try to do. And he might even meet up with Merle, and that would be cool. But I don't think that he would have stuck around after the death of Rick, and then the loss of everything else. And then he wouldn't really want to stick with Shane and these guys, would he? I don't think so. Especially since I don't think he really liked any of the other characters anyway, right? I mean, he saved T-Dog, that's right. But then we do have a problem now that, let's say they did escape and all of these people survived, but Carol did die. Now we'd be stuck with a very smaller group, and would they run into other characters? They wouldn't. We know they wouldn't. Most likely, they wouldn't run into any of the characters that we are with currently, like Michonne, Tyrese, Sasha. It would just be this small group. And yeah, I don't think they would actually get anyone back with them, because who would want to stick with a group that looks this pathetic? Now, yeah. From there, I think we would probably see a real conflict between the group, and eventually we'd probably see some splitting up and some coming back and some argument over who should be leader maybe, and then just a total distrust towards each other, and then we would probably see a loss of Maggie, because at that point she wasn't very tough. She could do some fighting, but she wasn't like adept in killing walkers, and it seemed like Rick sort of supplied them with the proper ways of killing walkers and stuff, and without him, I highly doubt that many of these characters would have developed into survival people. Now, also, Shane is a bit insane, as we know. He, really seemed weird about Lori the whole time, and as that character alone, he probably would have caused these characters to want to split away. So let's say we did see a split away of characters. I would say after Maggie died, T-Dog and Glenn probably would not want to stay around, but I think T-Dog would just get the hell out of there. He seemed like he was smart enough to know that he should get out. Remember, he was talking to Dale about how they should just get in a car and take off. If he gets to the point where most of the group is dead and he's following a freaking idiot, he would take off. Now with this group, we kind of already would see a love triangle, because Shane loves Lori. We know that Shane was with, what's her name? Andrea. And then Lori, I'm not sure if she would love Shane, but it's just this weird love triangle going on there. And then, would Glenn stick around after all that? He no longer has some sort of person that he seems to care about, but he doesn't seem like a loner. He would definitely become Shane's right-hand man. That's just my opinion. He didn't seem to really care too much about who he follows, it seems. He's not very efficient by himself, and he definitely needs a group to stick by, but I'm not sure. But by now, I would think that the governor probably would have caught on to where these people are, and he would have probably killed them. So if, let's say the governor doesn't find out where they are or anything, though, they would just spend the rest of their existence living off of the land and trying to keep moving and stuff until we would probably see the death of Andrea before the death of anyone else. And with a group that small, they don't really stand a chance. I think we would probably not even see a full 5 seasons worth, or 6 seasons is what we're at now. We would not see that much with just Shane as the leader. Now, of course, that's logically speaking. If it was the actual show and they did all this stuff, we would probably see Shane just convert himself into Rick's position, and they would have gone a similar route. But what it would have gone as, logically, yes, this is what we would end up with. And then eventually, they would all be dead. I could imagine Lori dies, and then Shane goes crazy and ends up dying himself. Then we'd be left with, what, this? Carl would be dead. Poor Glenn all by himself. I doubt he would last long. And then whole group is dead. So yes, I believe, I would predict full group death within 4 seasons to 3 seasons. Just not much life left for them. 2 seasons after Rick, perhaps. The only one that would really be left is, or the only 2, is Daryl and T-Dog. that's my prediction there. So, this is my little idea here. If it had come down to such a thing, the group would not have survived, really. But, of course, show-wise, it would go another way, but I've said that before, and I'm not going to keep saying that, that's annoying. But then the true question would be, how long would these two last? Daryl would definitely last out the apocalypse, but all by himself, I don't think T-Dog could last that long, considering he had sliced himself up before, and that didn't work out well. And then he did get bitten in Season 3 by getting too close to a walker, I suppose, and mishandling the walker. So we would probably see the death of T-Dog, too. So, really, Shane's group would be ruined. Shane is not a good leader, and he was an interesting character, but as, if he were a real human being, you wouldn't want to hang around him, you wouldn't want him to be your leader, and you most definitely would not want to even associate with him. He's a guy who's willing to do anything for one person, Lori, and that is creepy, but then that's also bad for leader position because instead of taking care of his own people, he would be thinking about one person. Which, as for a leader, that's just bunk. Okay, well, tell me what you guys think. What's your prediction? What would you think would happen if Shane killed Rick and then he moved on from there? Now, we could talk about what would happen show-wise, but that's just not as interesting to me. What would happen in theory? What would happen based off of the way that Shane's character was written and the way that he acts, really? Just the way he would lead. What do you guys think would happen there? So I looked over some of the previous seasons and stuff and analyzed all this stuff. So this is my prediction based off of little things that I've seen and little stuff that I've thought over. So again, there's no accuracy here, and the show would go completely different from my predictions of how it would go this way. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to check out my other videos. I hope you weren't too bored by this one, and make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.